Hello, everyone, and welcome to enVision Together, going to our next level of best. Today's guest is Philip Blackett, and he has a very interesting chat to share with us that's going to challenge us in our thinking, I think, some of us, but it's healthy food for thought. So that's why I'm delighted to have him on the show. And with that, Philip, will you go ahead and tell us a little more about yourself, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Pamela. I really am happy to have this conversation with you. And yeah, just to get started, it's always quite a challenge to be able to try to condense nearly 40 years of living in like 1 or 2 minutes, but I'll do my best. Um, so for me, born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, so Southerner at heart, lover of all things barbecue, Chick-fil-A, sweet tea related. Went to college in North Carolina at Chapel Hill, major in political science and economics. Then went up north to New York City, worked on Wall Street, corporate America, done some entrepreneur endeavors in between. Later went back to school for my MBA at Harvard. Then later bought a business during the pandemic, rode the roller coaster of ownership during that time, and also got my Master's of Divinity degree at seminary at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary during that point.
Oh, no.
Um, and now gotten to a point now where I'm thinking about as I approach 40 later on this year, most people think, oh my gosh, 40, midlife crisis. I'm
Mhm.
thinking about it more so since, you know what? God has been so good to me up to this point. If this is indeed my midpoint, um, I need to consider how I spend the second half of my life, God willing. And a lot of that's dealing with, trying to have a positive influence and impact on the people I come across, preparing the next generation to try to leave this world better than I found it,
Mhm.
and just have that sort of legacy in terms of, experience and teaching that sort, whether it's through the books I've written or the people I speak to or the businesses I consult with going forward. Just a mix of that, in addition to being a husband of 8 years and an active and present father of twin daughters who are 7 years
Oh,
old. That's essentially how I'm trying to be the best of what I can be during the remaining time I have left here.
uh, that's such a great introduction. Thank you for sharing all of that information about yourself. And how impressive. You shared so much to say you're 40. My God, it's like the rest of us feel like maybe we need to hurry up and catch up. No, that's beautiful. All right, thanks for sharing. It's always good to let the audience get some context of who it is we're talking to before we start delving into the topic, the subject. And maybe because of something you've just shared, we're more inclined to have a closer listen. So, with that, authors are often driven to tell stories or write about topics that have somehow been inspired, they've been inspired to explore. This inspiration to write can stem from a challenging place and or a celebratory place. Will you tell us something about what made the topic of your book important to share? Why were you so inspired to write this book?
Yeah, so I've written 6 books this year, and I think the one that's been most popular, most helpful for people, especially in this time, is a book called Disagree Without Disrespect: How to Respectfully Debate with Those Who Think, Believe, and Vote Differently from You. And
Mhm.
so the story behind that, what inspired me to write this book was quite honestly, my family, because I tend to believe that the quality of our lives are often measured by the quality of our relationships.
Mhm.
And one of our most important relationships is the relationship we have with our family. And
Absolutely.
so, 4th of July last year, I had my sister's family come up here to visit my family along with our mom.
Mhm.
And so, when all the adults were in the living room, my sister and I were having a conversation. I don't remember exactly what the topic was about that conversation nowadays, but I do remember that we were on opposite sides of the spectrum
Mhm.
on this one particular issue. And so while we were discussing or debating the issue at hand, my mom jumps in,
Mhm.
not necessarily to participate in the debate, but
Mhm.
basically to officiate it and put it to end prematurely,
Mhm.
almost like a referee, just without the zebra shirt and the whistle. And so she basically said, along the lines of, hey, we got fireworks coming up later on tonight. I have no intention of seeing fireworks happen right now.
Mhm.
And so while I appreciate the the intent behind what she did, trying to preserve the peace, have a family memory we can actually look at fondly in retrospect later on. The impact, I think, Pamela, was I think it was a lost opportunity.
Mm,
It was a lost opportunity for my sister and I to get to know each other better. We're fairly close, only 22 months apart. We don't see each other often because of distance and the fact we have families of our own. And I would imagine that you probably would agree with me that in the world of social media, smartphones, text messages, emails, that sort of thing, some conversations are better had in
mm,
person and
mhm.
face to face when you
Yes.
can have them. And this is one of those conversations I wish we were able to have. But because of fear of disagreement, a different point of view, and more importantly, how we navigate that sort of disagreement or tension between two people, it was better said that we just don't have the conversation altogether
Mm,
rather than actually trying to explore how to have it lovingly and respectfully.
right.
And so I think in retrospect, for me, I was basically saying to myself, I wonder if that was the case for me, having that sort of experience. I wonder how many other people around the world are probably having similar conversations where they can't talk about something they truly care about, that's important to them, they want to share with somebody they care about as well. But because of the fear of disagreement and how to navigate that, they just can't have that conversation. And because of that, the quality of relationship with those people they care about is not to the way they want it to be.
Mhm.
And so I was just thinking to myself, okay, what would I do to change that? Because it sounds like we just lost the rules of engagement and how to do this respectfully. And so that's what came out to this 5-step framework I created. And that's what came out to this book, Disagree Without Disrespect, How to Respectfully Debate with Those Who Think, Believe, and Vote Differently from You.
That's interesting. Um, and you know, these situations happen in all families. As I'm listening to you, I remember a time when my brother and I, who extremely close, and are about we were about 21 months apart. He passed away some years ago, 2010. But we were so close. People would ask my mother all the time, "How did you raise them to be so close?" And we thought this is something all siblings had. Wasn't until we got older that we realized, oh, our relationship is kind of different in the sense that we are so close. But we had an argument at one point, and it kind of persisted off and on. It wasn't really an argument; it was a debate. He would debate me about some things in the Bible. We were both raised Christian, but as we got older, he still embraced Christian beliefs, but he was kind of being eclectic and taking on other beliefs too, and then asking me what did I think about it, and we would just, be at odds about it. Um, and Boy, that was a hard window for us. At a certain point, God told me to stop trying to do the work of the Holy Spirit, trying to convince him with my words. He just said, be quiet and pray. And sure enough, inside of 2 years, our relationship was restored and healthy as ever. um, it doesn't directly apply to what you shared, but that's what it made me think of. And I think when you do have healthy relationships and love is present, that is a powerful foundation to get through any debate or conflict or argument. Um, so I guess I would kind of remind our audience that that's a foundation you can rely on if that's present in your families to be able to open up and respect each other and hear each other out. You and I were
Yeah.
talking before too that I had a conversation with friends the other day for breakfast where we had differing opinions, and but we respect each other and we love each other, so we were able to share ideas and not be offended by one another. And for the most part, we probably walked away with our beliefs pretty much where they were. I think some of us may have shifted a little bit in our thinking as a result of that conversation. but it was okay. You get to share.
which is
And
a gift in and of itself.
yeah, yeah.
Because
And
if you
I
think about
think
it
that's
too,
what you're
Pamela,
getting at.
yeah, if you think about it, we often don't think that when we share something that's personal to us, that's significant or important or vulnerable, that person doesn't have to share it with us.
Yeah,
And so if that person feels comfortable or open or trusting to share that with you, uh, one, I see that as a gift.
yeah,
And it's also an opportunity for us because how we treat that gift now in our hands
yeah.
will often dictate what that person's response will be as far as how many more gifts we get from them
Mhm,
in terms of further thoughts and ideas and
mhm,
vulnerable moments
yeah.
that really build a greater intimacy when it comes to our relationships.
So we're going to piggyback on that thought in just a minute. Before we get there, we're going to delve into that area a little bit more. But before we get there, tell us about the 5 step framework that you discuss in your book and why these are the principles you chose to focus on. Of all the
Yeah.
principles that you could focus on, why these 5?
So one, I wanted to focus with five because simplicity is key, especially when you're trying to remember something. If I
Mm.
could make it into three, it'd be better, but I couldn't break it down past five.
And I thought
Um,
you were going to go all spiritual and say 5 is the number of grace. Look at me.
well,
I was just being silly.
my favorite number is seven, so that's completion,
Hmm.
which would have been a complete guidebook, a complete principles, set of principles to go off of. I think it just is a little tougher to remember seven of them compared to five. So I was like, okay, if we can't do three Trinity wise, okay, let's do five. Okay.
Okay.
So
Still a good number.
so the first step is we have to separate the idea or belief from the identity of the believer.
Hmm.
And why that's significant, Pamela, is because oftentimes, depending on the person we talk to and the idea at hand, that topic may be so important to that person to the point that they're so intertwined with it that it essentially becomes who they are.
Hmm.
And so for you to disagree with that idea, it comes off to them as you're disagreeing with who they are.
Hmm.
It's something that they could likely take personal,
Hmm.
be defensive about. If you're criticizing that belief, now it feels like you're hating on them.
Right.
And now they're more likely to be a little more aggressive, maybe close off, because now it's like I got to protect my ego, I got to save face,
Right.
especially if you're doing this in front of your friends
Yeah.
or doing it publicly, which adds a whole nother element to the whole situation to begin with. But essentially what happens there is you can't talk about the idea at hand without some collateral damage on the person that believes it.
Right.
The second step is, and I think what you were mentioning before about family relates to this, is we can disagree with the idea or belief and still respect and love the believer.
Hmm.
One
Absolutely.
of the lies that many of us have is the belief that love is contingent on agreement and affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't agree with what you say, Pamela, you think that I don't respect and love you as a person. If I don't affirm the way you go about life, then you think that I don't love you.
Hmm.
It two things can be true at the same time.
Yes.
I can disagree with what you're saying, and I can still respect and love you as a person,
Absolutely.
as a sibling, as
Hmm.
a parent, as a child, as a friend, as a colleague, as a human being.
Hmm.
But if we don't find a way to make that clear to the other person, how can we possibly get into step three where we actually talk about the issue at hand and just focus on its merit? So with step three, you're focusing on the issue at hand, focusing on its merit. What I'm talking about is the facts, the logic, the research, the data, the reviews, the performance, the results. You
Hmm.
know, an objective analysis of the issue at hand. Try to make an apples to apples comparison without resorting to name calling.
Right.
Right? Because the moment you get into name calling, the whole debate's out. We're going personal.
Yeah.
Nothing good is coming out of that. If you
Hmm.
have that, you move into step 4, where essentially it's important for us to be good sports about the debate we had, regardless of the outcome. Basically, apply what we learned in youth sports, regardless if your team won or lost. We still lined up, shook hands, said good game, because no one likes a sore loser. No one likes a sore winner. So you can still be good sports about whatever the debate outcome came out. And then step 5, basically, regardless of the outcome, you can still respect and appreciate that person. Even if you agree to disagree, you can chalk it up as diversity of thought. But more importantly, keep the door open for continued dialogue,
Yes.
continued way to build the relationship, because hopefully we look at it as the relationship we have with that person should be more important than who's right or who's wrong.
I love those 5 that you have there. I can tell you put a lot of thought into it. So thanks for not just sharing what the 5 are, but expounding. Um, so, how does being misunderstood hurt? What are some of the characteristics of that kind of hurt?
Well, I think when it comes to relationships and intimacy essentially, like, the root of it is to be known more fully.
Hmm.
So to be known more fully is to be understood more fully. And if you feel misunderstood, essentially what happens there is that you don't feel like somebody is truly knowing who you are.
Hmm.
And in that sense, there's a distance between you two.
That's what I was gonna say. It's a degree of acceptance. Um, being vulnerable, being okay, being free to expose and expose a part of yourself and have it be accepted. Accepting doesn't mean the person agrees with your ideas, but they at least accept your right to um, believe as you do. Hmm. Okay. You once told me conversations are better when had in person rather than through smartphones, etc. And actually, you touched on that a little bit. Is there anything more that you want to expound on as it relates to that?
Well, Pamela, I don't know if you ever gotten called into a text back and forth debate, right?
Hmm.
It's probably something that I know for me, I didn't really enjoy.
Right.
I've done that before with people that I love, and I realize that usually nobody's changed opinion. There's been a significant amount of back and forth, and I want my 27 minutes of time back that I lost.
And you know
Because
what? It's hard to lose the time, but it's also, I think that having discussions, especially difficult conversations that way, leaves so much room for error. Like,
mhm.
I can't read your facial expressions. I don't hear your voice inflection. I don't know that
Mhm.
you meant it in a soft manner and it came across through text as, oh, he's being so aggressive, or, uh, a lot is lost. So that's why
Yep.
I agree with you.
Yeah, of course. Because I think with text, all you got is words, and that's what I believe is like only 5% of communication. So you're missing the other 95% with regards to tonality and
Mhm.
body language. And guess what's the perfect place where we have that 5% only communication that a lot of people spend a lot of time on? Social media comments.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's often what pulls us further apart, is just how nasty those comments can get and how
Mhm.
easy it is to misinterpret what's going on because it's just words.
Mhm. Okay. So, why is it important to be fully yourself, even in difficult conversations? What is at risk if you don't?
Intimacy. I think as far as a lot of people want to be heard, they want to be understood, and they want to be loved for who they are. But you can't love somebody who isn't who they are.
Mhm. Mhm. Unfortunately, I think you're right. But unfortunately, there's a lot of conversations had that are not authentic, that are not honest. And I'm not even just talking about like if you're on two different sides of the spectrum of politics or um, it's just a lot of
Surface
we
level.
try to say what we think other people want to hear rather than what's true, even if that truth is just your perspective, not the actual truth. It's more
Hmm.
close to the truth to reveal your perspective and then have a real conversation that may cause us all to see what the actual truth is. But as long as we're guarded and have walls up and we're afraid to unveil, so to speak, we're just going in circles. And that I
Yep.
believe that's half of society's problem. It's families, but also just society. We don't really hear each other because we're not really listening and we're not really sharing.
Hmm. I mean, it gets back to the whole sense of, somebody sharing something like that with you, it's a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And how you respond to it. If I feel like I'm going to potentially get attacked, or if it's going to be used against me later on,
Mm-hmm.
or it's going to change the dynamic as far as whether you care about me or not, or if it's truly that love is conditional rather than unconditional, then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe it's easy for me to stay on the surface level
Yeah.
and avoid digging any deeper and
Mm-hmm.
just stick to small talk, which really is a lot of conversation about nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But at least we're not risking getting into some sort of fight that can go violent.
Right. I um I used to be around an educator, a professional development specialist who used to always talk about courageous conversations. And I think I'm that kind of person. I once lived in a foreign country. It was South Africa, and it was 14 years removed from apartheid. And I had courageous conversations. There were people who were, around me, black, white, Indian, colored, African, and they um I just wanted to know. So I would ask all of them. It didn't matter which race they were. I'm like, so what were your thoughts about apartheid? And what did you do? And what happened? What was it like for you? And it would sometimes shock people. And I wasn't doing it for shock factor, but I just wanted to know. I mean, that was in recent history. How did you navigate that? And I learned some amazing things. I learned things like it was possible for some white people to reach 18 years old and never even lay eyes on a black person
Mhm.
in South Africa. So that, and then so it helped me understand then, because it was in a teaching setting. Um, it helped me understand why they would say certain things like to me that if they observed me teaching, oh, your expectations are so high, I need to raise my expectations. I applaud them for coming to that realization, but it was interesting, just interesting. uh, and I had grace for them because what if I had been born and raised in a system like that and that was my experience? But at
Mhm.
least, open to dialogue is how change can happen. And I applaud you because what you're doing is heavy lifting. The book you've written and the topics you want people to explore, that's heavy lifting. So good job.
Thank you.
Of course. What do you think is getting in the way when a person chooses to end a relationship due to differing beliefs on a topic?
I think it's more so the sense of you're having a fear of missing out on what truly makes that person who he or she is. I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's a word that we fought so much to not be associated with that I think nowadays we're coming closer and closer to being closer to now than we were before. And it's prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting to a point now where we feel like we know all we need to know about somebody by somebody's profile,
Mm-hmm.
or even the sense of even if I took the time to have a first encounter or date with you, all of a sudden, because somebody said something that might have been perceived as out of turn or a faux pas, and that sort of thing, all of a sudden, we don't even want to know the backstory on why that person said it. We're
Mm-hmm.
just ready to go ahead and ask for the check and then
Mm-hmm.
ghost that person and never talk to that person again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that a big part of it is just there is an aspect to learning about people over time that you're going to have ups and downs. If that was the case, you had to be in agreement and liking that person at all times, there would be a lot of marriages that wouldn't have made it past 5 years or so.
Hmm.
So you got to stick with it if you really care about knowing that person.
Hmm. Right. And to have healthy conversations, it also is so heavily rooted in knowing who you are. I think we're easily offended when we haven't done enough work on ourselves to know who we are, and then so we can be okay with letting someone else be who they are. If that
Hmm.
makes sense. I think
Yeah,
we act a lot from places of our own insecurity.
because I think a lot of it, to your point, Pamela, is there may be a core that you have conviction in, and you may have some area around the core that's flexible, that you're still trying to figure out this wiggle room that's, you can mold a little bit.
Hmm.
But when you come across another person that may have a different set of core convictions and wiggle room, you know, one person's likely going to be able to influence the other, and it may make you comfortable or it may make you insecure.
Hmm. Hmm.
A common example, I remember a story that Sidney Poitier once said is that, when two people are walking outside, a significant phenomenon happens. Either one person walks ahead and the other person catches up, or vice versa. But either way, you're catching up to somebody else's pace.
Mm.
And so the question is, when you're
Wow.
engaging in conversation, that can happen as well. But if you're not together, so to speak, as far as who you are, that can either make you comfortable learning about someone else's differences and how they're put together, or insecure.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good analogy, if you will. Hmm. I'd never heard that one, but thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Um, so we are coming to the end of our episode together. It's been a very interesting conversation. I know it's so much more we could say, and I have to say, we did say so much more before I started recording. We got so into a conversation that it it I should have pushed record a lot sooner. But if everyone forgets what we just talked about, just it won't happen, but let's just suppose they forget everything we just said. What's the one thing, the one gem that you say, but people, please don't forget this one very, very important thing?
It is possible to disagree with someone else's views and still respect and love that person in a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm. I really like what you're doing. I do. I think it's so needed. Um, and I think it's needed in I know a little bit more about your book because of our chats, but I think it may be needed even in ways you haven't addressed yet in the book. I
I'm
think
definitely open to that.
it's very, very relevant. So um, it's my hope that people will get your book and really open their minds to really think it through and see what's profitable for them, uh, and hear what you have to say. So now we're at the point where I'd like to extend to you anything you would like to share about how the audience can remain in touch with you, get your book. I don't know, follow you on social media. Anything you want to share along those lines, please do.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Pamela. So, for those that are interested to learn more about my book, Disagree Without Disrespect: How to Respectfully Debate with Those Who Think, Believe, and Vote Differently from You, you can go on to Amazon to look it up by the book title, Disagree Without Disrespect, or just look it up by my name, Philip Blackett, Philip Blackett, to look up for that book or the other 5 books I've written that's on Amazon for you to take a look at and see if it's something a good fit for you to read. You can also go on my website, philipblackett.com, or look me up on social media, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. or YouTube. Just look up my name, Philip Blackett.
Wonderful. Again, thanks so much for being my guest. And while you were just sharing, I went back to your 5-step framework. And again, I think there's something there for uh, a guide of just difficult conversations overall. I know you're focusing on a particular area with this book, but I think there's a lot to be learned from that framework in different settings or different topics. So, God bless you. Thank you for being a guest on my show. And I really appreciate this conversation. And I know it'll be a benefit to my audience.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Pamela. I enjoyed our conversation as well.
Wonderful.